You know, Star Trek The Next Generation is really, really good. A fact that I reminded myself of after returning to the series while trying to wash away the stench of Section 31.
If there's one word I could use to sum it all up, it would be fun.
And after taking a few weeks to enjoy what many consider the pinnacle of the franchise, I thought I would take a moment to share with you some of my favorite episodes. So sit back, relax, and be sure to stretch as we take a look at my top 5 Star Trek The Next Generation episodes. So, right out of the gate, number 5 on the list is going to be controversial among hardcore fans of the show. It's the Season 7 episode Genesis, where the crew of the Enterprise is infected with a strange virus that causes them to de-evolve into various types of animals. Troy turns into a frog, Riker turns into a caveman, and Worf turns into whatever this is. And all of this happens because Reginald Barclay had a cold.
Right.
Thankfully, Data and Captain Picard have been off the ship this whole time, so now that they're back, they have to find a way to reverse the effects of the disease before Worf kills them and Picard mutates into a chimpanzee.
Possibly similar to a lemur or pygmy marmoset.
So, as you can see, this is definitely one of the crazier episodes, and plot-wise, it is kind of silly. I mean, you can't help but laugh after seeing Data's cat turned into an iguana. However, I can't help but love this episode for a couple of reasons. The first of which is because it features my favorite TNG tertiary crew member, Reginald Barclay. I've always liked this character because he's the opposite of every other person on the Enterprise, and because he's played by Dwight Schultz, who also played Murdoch on the A-Team, and I really loved the A-Team as a kid.
Shut up, fool, you ain't no fish.
Also, I really enjoy the pairing of Picard and Data together. Patrick Stewart and Brent Spiner work really well together, and it's nice to see characters who are put in what is essentially a horror movie actually make smart, rational decisions. And on top of that, these flashlights are also pretty cool. Is it the best episode of the series? No, not at all, but despite its issues, it's definitely what I would consider a guilty pleasure, and that's why it's number 5 on my list. Oh, sorry. Anyway, number 4 on my list is the Season 5 episode Disaster, which is pretty much an old 70s era disaster movie in space, where after coming in contact with a quantum filament, the crew of the Enterprise is split up into different groups, all of whom have to work on different problems around the ship. On the bridge, Chief O'Brien, Ensign Rowe, and Counselor Troy are debating on what to do about the ship's damaged warp core. Dr. Crusher and Geordi are stuck in the cargo bay, where they have to put out a fire while working on a musical.
I am the very model of a modern Major General.
Gay.
Riker and Data have to crawl through the bowels of the Enterprise so they can get to engineering and get the ship back online. Worf is in 10 forward, where he eventually has to deliver a baby.
You are fully dilated to 10 centimeters. You may now give birth.
And Captain Picard has to come face to face with his greatest fear, babysitting a group of young children. And separately, everyone on the crew has to overcome near impossible odds to make sure that everyone aboard the Enterprise is safe. Now, by the time Season 5 came around, the show was really hitting on all cylinders, so much so that Season 5 is widely considered to be one of the best in the series run. However, there are 2 reasons why Disaster is, for me at least, a standout episode. The first of which is that everyone in the main cast is given something to do, something that sadly doesn't always happen for characters who aren't stationed on the bridge. But in this episode, the writers managed to not only include everyone, but put them in pairings that we don't get to see too often. The other reason that I really like Disaster so much is that it gives Counselor Troy some much-needed character growth, as we see her come to terms with the fact that despite her rank of Lieutenant Commander, she is not really prepared for such a position, which eventually causes her to take being a Starfleet officer much more seriously. It's always good to see characters taken out of their comfort zones for a change, and that's why Disaster is number 4 on my list. As I'm sure you all know, you can't have Star Trek without time travel. After all, it's been a staple of the franchise since its inception.
My friend is obviously Chinese.
So, with that in mind, number 3 on my list is one that you will actually find on a lot of people's favorite episodes list, and that's yesterday's Enterprise, an episode that starts with Worf drinking some prune juice and practicing for his new job as the co-host of a Red Pill podcast.
Earth females are too fragile.
Until suddenly, he's called onto the bridge where he and the rest of the crew observe the Enterprise C emerging from a rip in the space-time continuum. While this is happening, everything on the Enterprise D has suddenly changed. The look of the bridge is different, everyone is wearing sashes for some reason, and most notably, Lieutenant Tasha Yar is still alive.
What?
So, why is this happening? Well, it turns out that in the original timeline, the Enterprise C was destroyed while coming to the aid of a Klingon outpost that was under attack by Romulans. And this show of courage eventually led to a peace treaty being signed between the Federation and the Klingons, which prevented the two sides from going to all-out war. However, with the Enterprise C being sucked into the temporal rift, none of that happened, causing the Klingons to go to war with the Federation, which is why everything went from this to this.
Time travel!
The only person aware that changes in the timeline have been made is Guinan, who tells Picard that the Enterprise C must go back through the time rip so that the timeline can be corrected, even if that means that everyone on board is killed. A decision that is made all the more difficult with the realization that restoring the original timeline will result in Tasha being killed yet again. However, after learning that she doesn't belong in the current timeline and that she will die anyway when the timeline is reset, she, along with Shooter McGavin, team up to get the Enterprise C back through the time rip and set everything back to normal. Now, for the sake of time, I'll just go into the biggest reason why I like this episode so much, and that's because this episode gives a proper ending to the character of Tasha by giving her some agency in how she dies and allowing her to go out a hero, instead of what happened to her in Season 1, where she's killed by a leaking printer cartridge. A death that to many fans always felt meaningless, even though it was very impactful for the rest of the series and meant a lot to the characters on the show. And seeing the character come back and make her death really matter not only corrected this past mistake, but also gave the audience that felt she always deserved better some much needed closure. And that's why yesterday's Enterprise is number 3 on my list. Number 2 on my list is probably one of, if not the most famous episode of Next Generation. In fact, it's become so popular that even people who aren't Star Trek fans know at least something about it, and that's Best of Both Worlds Part 1 and 2. Now, is combining 2 episodes into one spot on a top 5 list cheating? Possibly. Do I care? Not at all, because essentially they are one long episode that starts with the Season 3 finale, Best of Both Worlds Part 1, where the Enterprise is responding to a distress call from a Federation outpost, only to discover that it's been destroyed by the Borg. Later in the episode, Riker and Captain Picard take a meeting with Admiral Hansen and the ambitious Lieutenant Commander Shelby. Anyway, the Borg isn't the only issue that Riker and Picard are having to deal with, as the Admiral informs the Captain that Riker has been offered a captain's position on another ship, and Shelby tells Riker that she wants to replace him on the Enterprise. However, none of that matters at the moment because Picard is taken by the Borg.
A Borg.
However, as Part 2 starts, the new weapon has no effect, so now all of Starfleet has come together in order to stop the Borg from assimilating Earth, a plan that immediately fails, resulting in every ship but the Enterprise being destroyed. Essentially, it's the same thing that happens in the J.J. Abrams Star Trek, but with less lens flare. Realizing that the only way to beat the Borg is to remove Picard from their hive mind, Riker and the crew come up with a plan.
What is it?
To separate the 2 sections of the Enterprise and allowing Data and Worf to sneak aboard the Borg ship and bring Picard back.
Mission accomplished. We have him.
Where Data is able to hack into the Borg computer brain, destroying their ship and bringing Picard back to normal.
How do you feel?
Almost human.
Now, because there's a lot to condense about these 2 episodes, I'll just get right to the point and say that the reason why I like Best of Both Worlds is that it's essentially a TNG movie that delivers everything you could want from a Star Trek movie. There's plenty of action, great character moments, and consequences that have affected not just the show, but the franchise as a whole. And I also really like that these 2 episodes are very Riker-focused, where we learn more about how he feels about his job, his reluctance to become captain, and seeing him take control control when the need arises. Best of Both Worlds 1 and 2 are episodes that have something for everyone. Action and adventure for casual fans, character drama for hardcore fans, and that's why they combine to form the number 2 spot on the list.
I'm a woman. I haven't had the comfort of a husband.
So, number 1 on my list probably won't surprise many of you because it's number 1 on a lot of people's lists, and that's the Season 2 episode, Measure of a Man, where we are introduced to Bruce Maddox, a Starfleet scientist who wants to have sex with Data. Well, actually, he wants to dismantle Data so that he can eventually learn to mass produce androids, a request that causes Data to resign from Starfleet. However, Maddox argues that Data can't resign because he's the property of Starfleet and therefore has no rights. So, a trial is held to determine what will happen to Data, with Captain Picard representing Data and Riker being forced to represent the interests of Starfleet, a role that he takes on reluctantly but effectively throughout the episode.
And now a man will shut it off.
However, over the course of the trial, it becomes clear that there's more to Data than meets the eye.
You have no other portraits of your fellow crew members. Why this person?
She was special to me, sir.
Excited at the idea that Data might have 3 vibration settings, the judge rules that Data is not property, and he's granted all the rights and freedoms of any other sentient life form. Now, similar to Best of Both Worlds, Measure of a Man is one of those TNG episodes that's managed to exist outside the usual Trek fandom, and this level of popularity has been achieved for a couple of reasons, the first being that it's so well acted. However, the standout is Patrick Stewart, who makes the most out of his Shakespearean training by giving one of the best character speeches in the history of television.
Starfleet was founded to seek out new life. Well, there it sits.
This episode has also stayed so popular because the issue of rights, human or otherwise, is an issue that's still greatly contested today, making this episode just as relevant now as it was then. To me, Measure of a Man perfectly encapsulates everything that's great about Star Trek The Next Generation. Sure, there are more exciting episodes, or moments that are more interesting to look at, but for me at least, this is everything that Star Trek should be. A perfect combination of thought-provoking moral questions and real-world issues wrapped in the veneer of science fiction, and that's why Measure of a Man is my favorite TNG episode. And there it is, folks. My top 5 favorite Star Trek The Next Generation episodes. How does it stack up against your top 5 list? Leave a comment below and let me know what your favorite Star Trek The Next Generation episodes are. I'd really like to know. And if you wouldn't mind helping me reach 2,000 subscribers by subscribing to the channel, I would really appreciate it.
Do it. Do it. Do it!
Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.